Following the short entitled How Enoch Became Metatron, I got asked a question regarding, well, how does this actually work? So here's what we know at the 60 Skills curriculum. First of all, it's important to remember that God, or divinity, or divine providence, or whatever you wish to call it, makes systems, not exceptions. So, through the historical record, we have an example of two human individuals who became angels. Now, normally, this involves something known as the Order of Melchizedek, which is a process by which powerfully enabled magicians become angels in the service of the Lord. Now, the two known examples of this are Enoch becoming Metatron and Elijah becoming Sandalphon. Okay, so this indicates that there's a mechanism by which human beings can transfigure into angels. Fair enough. So if there's a mechanism for doing this, then in theory, a powerfully inclined magician could engage in this as well. And that's basically going to be the topic of the rest of this discussion. So, we've established that there's a mechanism in place. All right, what would be necessary to pull this off? Okay, first of all, you would need a base level of development in a meditative system. Obviously, there's the 60 Skills curriculum or Franz Barden's IIH, and there are a number of others. In this, you need to develop your ability to interact with your subtle bodies, specifically your vital, astral, and mental bodies. And if you're not familiar with that concept, there are a lot of videos on the 60 Skills channel that you can check out. Okay, once you have the ability to work with those and you can identify them clearly, then you need to strengthen them so that they can essentially handle the transfiguration or change that's about to occur. Now, the most effective way to do this is through what we call body training, which works with the soft tissue in the body, specifically the ligaments, tendons, and fascia. Why? Well, in many ways, the subtle bodies, such as what we call the astral or the mental body, are just further refined and developed versions of these ligaments, tendons, and facial tissue within the body. So, by training those tissues extensively, on a physical level, you also strengthen the astral and mental bodies as well. Now, there's a lot more to this, but this is just kind of roughly working our way through the steps here. All right, once that's done, the next thing that has to be done is you have to end up developing what in some schools is referred to as the gold body or gold body development. Okay, what does this mean? Functionally, what this means is you end up collapsing the mental and the astral bodies together and fusing them. Okay, how does this work exactly? Well, you've got your subtle bodies, your physical body, your astral body, your mental body. But you also have these things called a matrix that connects the two. So there's a physical astral matrix, there's an astral mental matrix, and there's a mental akashic matrix, and an akashic non-dual light matrix. So what are some methods for collapsing those together? Well, if you study Franz Barden's third book on Key to the True Kabbalah, there's some pretty big hints in there. Now, normally this is done through either using the letter R or the letter umlaut A. By developing sufficient strength at that and willing the astral and mental bodies to fuse together, you can end up doing this, and this creates a kind of angelic body. All right, now, that's all well and good, but, honestly, what does this really mean? Okay, well, there are some examples of angelic beings who are not in service of the Lord. Of course, there are the angels that revolted against heaven, there's that example. Probably don't want to go down that road. But there is also the example of the Egyptian deities, who, as far as I can tell, are basically angelic beings, but they're not in service of divinity, they're in service of themselves. This is a little interesting and a bit of a controversial take. But here's why I'm saying this. Several years ago, I decided that I wanted to engage in gold body creation, or gold body fusion. Okay. Got started with the process, got about 20 or 30 hours down to it, and I was visited by, sure enough, what was an Egyptian entity. And he said, you have to stop. You won't survive this process. I guess being a dumpy, overweight 50-year-old man, probably not the best starting material for this. But this is what I found out along the way. So, when you fuse the mental and astral bodies together, it's unclear exactly what this means if you have a physical body, or whether your physical body can even survive this process or not. I'll get to that in a minute. But on a subtle level, if you're a disincarnated being that doesn't have a physical body, this solves a very interesting problem. See, here's the thing. If you don't have a physical body, you don't have breath, which means you can't generate energy the way a living human being does. So how do entities on the subtle plane generate energy? Well, generally speaking, they do it by generating more mental energy through the process of concentration. However, while this empowers them at a subtle level, they can't really generate astral energy on their own to affect a whole lot in the here and now. But anybody who's ever worked with the Egyptian pantheon or the Greco-Roman pantheon has noticed that these things do have an ability to act on the astral level quite strongly sometimes, without having to take something from you necessarily in order to get it done. This makes them a little different. Well, what's the difference? Gold body fusion. They essentially became angels because divine providence, or if you will, God, has a method for creating these, and they simply utilized that for their own ends. This is one of the reasons why these entities have such an outsized presence in the subtle world that's different from a lot of other spirit beings. This has nothing to do with their being good. This has nothing to do with their being bad. This is just about what they're capable of doing and how it's, to say the least, a bit unusual as compared to other entities. All right. Now, say you want to go down this road. Say you have the physicality to pull it off. What are you going to get from this? Well, at a basic level, you're going to have to master the basic skills of the meditative and yogic process. It's probably going to take a couple of years. Then you're going to have to work through Kabbalistic letter theory and learn to work with, again, either the letter R or the letter umlaut O. And you're going to have to be able to do it very strongly. So let's say at a minimum this is probably going to take at least 3 to 4 years of pretty much full-time work. It's going to be pretty physically uncomfortable before you get to the point where you can even really begin to do this. Now, I haven't done this, and I don't know anyone else who has. So what I don't know is if you fuse the mental and astral bodies together, whether your physical body will survive that process or not. What will happen as a result of this is that you will be able to take large amounts of mental energy and transfer it directly into astral energy. On the subtle planes, this is something most entities can't do. So this is going to give you an outsized presence on the astral plane. Additionally, what this is going to do is this is going to allow you to do an end run around the cycle of reincarnation. But here's the thing. Okay, some people might use this as a ticket to really misbehave, because if you don't have to reincarnate, all that long-term karma, well, probably never going to have to deal with. Well, A, being a jerk on an esoteric level is never generally a very good idea. But B, if you study this stuff enough, what you're going to find out is that there are lots of little workarounds for karma, and eventually they all fail. So, All right, what does this mean? Okay, apparently there are some entities out there pursuing their own goals, and they're not necessarily tied to divine providence in the pursuit of those goals. Maybe those are good, maybe those are bad. What I can say is most of these entities are very old and have a kind of outsized power that, again, most other entities don't have. Now, by not reincarnating on the regular, okay, you don't get a clearing out of those, let's call them peculiar issues that bother us from one life to the next. You just remember the really important stuff. So in many ways, this is actually freeing because your prior conceptions of things, your prior ways of dealing with things, etc., tend not to hold you back. And as you incarnate, you tend to focus on the big picture stuff. If you never do that, and your personality at the point in time in which you accomplish gold body fusion stays the same, there's the potential that this could really hinder your long-term development. Now, I'm not an ancient Egyptian god, nor am I a Greco-Roman god. Maybe there are good reasons for doing this. Maybe they do ultimately have a relationship with divine providence. But in general, it appears that this is an end run at a minimum around the normal cycle of reincarnation. And whether that's healthy for you or not, or even a good idea or not, or whether you can even survive it at all in the flesh, well, that's not a question I can really answer for you. What I can say is the little bit of the pathway I went down on that was pretty physically uncomfortable, and at least while I'm doing it, the amount of subtle energy I could move into the here and now greatly accelerated. Again, whether that was sustainable or not, I honestly don't know. So if you enjoyed the topic of today's discussion, give us a like, consider subscribing to the channel, and if you'd like to learn more about it, come over to 60skills.com where you can learn all about the system and quite possibly meet some interesting people who might become that rarest thing of all that we call friends. Otherwise, as per usual, train hard and be well.